You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network.
You're listening to Straight to the Extra Point, your Niagara source for all news, draft coverage, free agency, weekly game analysis, game day betting picks, and fantasy football updates regarding the National Football League. Here's your hosts, Brandon Caputo and Miklos McMaster.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first installment of Straight to the Extra Point in video form. This is your May 27th, 2021 edition right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network, your source of North American sports coverage by sports fans for sports fans, delivered to you right here in the beautiful Niagara region. You can find us on social media for updates and promo codes by following the podcast on Twitter at Armchair GM Pod, and liking us on Facebook and Instagram, of course. You can listen to us on many platforms, including Spreaker.com, the free Spreaker app, as well as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, CastBox, and Deezer, and now in video form on YouTube.com, as my trusty subscribe pillow says right there. Make sure you're hitting that subscribe button and liking us on the YouTube version. And lastly, our beautiful user-friendly website, armchairgmsports.com, for all things regarding the network, including articles, podcast episodes, sponsors, and contributors. Everything's on there for you guys. Please go and check that out as well. We have a brand new mobile version of our website as well that is very much appreciated for those using mobile devices checking out our content. As always, I'm one of your hosts of Straight to the Extra Point. My name is Brandon Caputo. You can follow me on Twitter right underneath there at Capoots13_AGM with a Canadian Z. And as always, I'm pleased to be joined by my co-host for the NFL portion of the network. He is former OUA athlete for the Waterloo Warriors and aspiring medical professional. He is to my left here and looking glorious as always, Miklos McMaster. You can follow him on Twitter at Miklos_McMaster, enjoying his time on the West Coast, I guess, scouting the West Coast teams out there. Miklos, how's it going?
For the podcasters, I usually can't.
Oh, okay. What you just said, we had a little bit of technical difficulty there, so just go ahead and repeat what you just said.
Oh, yeah, Coach. I was just saying that I'm happy to be here, and it's beautiful to see your handsome face looking back at me while we're doing this football chat.
Awesome. Well, again, you're on the West Coast, I'm on the East Coast, so we might have a little bit of lags for you YouTube viewers, but for the first time ever, we are in video form, so thank you very much for checking us out there, and obviously we are available to you audio listeners as well on all those different platforms. So on today's show, you can see by the YouTube thumbnail, we're going to be discussing the NFL schedule release from a few weeks back. We had to get our draft stuff out of the way first, so before we could get into this, obviously, if you missed any of our draft recaps, those are live on the channel right now, as well as on demand on any audio platform. Go and check that out. We spent 4 hours almost of recording those two episodes, Miklos, so we kind of needed a few week break, if you, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it was beautiful, but there is such thing as too much football in one day, and sometimes you need a little bit of a break to do other things.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to get into Thursday night, Sunday night, and Monday night football schedules in the second segment. In this first segment, though, we are going to talk about kind of some of the scheduling changes for the NFL. It's going to be a little bit different this year, an adding of another regular season game. And we have some notes on that as well. And additionally, because of that, we are going to be losing a preseason game, and that has some ramifications on the cuts. And there's a couple of interesting notes here as far as the cuts that I think Miklos wants to discuss as far as the 3 stages of the cuts. We had gone away from that in 2017 where they just went to the one and only cut that we had, but now with the only 3 preseason games, they've kind of changed up the format a little bit, and it's kind of interesting. So we're going to have all that stuff for you guys on the video version on the screen. So with that said, Miklos, let's get into our first segment today, and it's brought to you by Thrive Fantasy, the fastest fantasy sports gambling platform for the casual sports fan. Pick over-unders of only the top-tier athletes in the given sport. Simple to navigate, an easy concept for those just getting into online betting. Use our code AGM Sports when you sign up today for a price match of your first deposit of $20 to $50. Prop up with Thrive Fantasy. So with that said, Miklos, and I'm going to pull it up here for our YouTube viewers here so they can follow along with us on the screen. The first part is interesting, and this is a tweet from Tom Pelissero, who covers the NFL, obviously. And it goes today, and it's this was posted just a few hours before recording this episode. So thank you, Tom, for making sure that you had this information out for us before we started recording so we could talk about it in today's schedule release episode. He goes on to say, the NFL owners just approved a 90-man roster to start training camp this year with cuts to 85 on August 17th. 80 on August 24th, and 53 on August 31st. Amidst COVID-19 challenges in 2020, many teams opened camp with an 80-man roster. That's an extra 300 players on rosters to start camp. The progressive cutdown occurs on a Tuesday after each preseason game. With only 3 preseason games, final cuts are 4 days earlier than normal. So, again, that's from Tom Pelissero on Twitter. Miklos, what are your initial thoughts to that? Again, 90-man roster, and then a cut after every game, but it goes from 5 to 5, and then you have a massive cut from 80 to 53, a 27-man cut in that last round of cuts. So we're going back to the 3 rounds of cuts. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, I get where they're coming from, why the cut drops off so harshly after. Like they want to get everyone as much opportunity as possible to try and make their NFL dreams come true, give coaches and front office staff the most time to evaluate these guys coming out. But then, it sounds so crazy. You end up being cut in the first 2 cuts, or say you make it through those first 2 cuts. The next cut is 27 guys that you need to cut all at once. And it's going to be such a harsh drop off. And it's going to be a pretty dark day for everybody when that happens. The amount of turnover in one day is going to be pretty incredible.
Yeah, but I think the one positive that comes out of this is we lose a preseason game, which I think everybody is on board for. There's a few people that enjoy a few preseason games, but 4 is just ridiculous, and the 4th one's usually just a throwaway anyway. But I think the big positive from this is that teams will still get a bye week in between the 3rd preseason game and the start of week 1 of the regular season. So they essentially are using the 4th preseason week as a week to kind of A, rest up, and B, kind of prepare your 53-man roster for week 1 of the regular season, as opposed to jumping right in after that 4th preseason game. I think that extra week of preparation, Miklos, and you would know playing university football yourself, that extra week of preparation and practice and getting ready for that first opponent in a real game in week 1 of the regular season, I think is going to be big for these teams. And maybe, we won't see teams come out as slow and out of the gate as maybe we have seen in previous years. Just, do you think that this is a positive step for the NFL?
Yeah, I think both ways. I think it's going to end up with a lot more competitive preseason games, where teams are going to have to try and do their best to see what they have as quick as possible, which means they're probably going to push a lot harder than they usually did in those early years. And especially given this bye week, you have more time to rest up. Maybe if guys get dinged up a little bit, that's okay. And then, as we always see in the NFL, post-bye week, you have an extra week of preparation, even though they don't have the film that they usually do during a regular season bye week on teams. For the most part, you have film in the past, especially if coaches haven't changed. You kind of know the tendencies that teams are going to come out with. There's very few teams out there that are going to be radically different from a previous year. Like Jacksonville, for example, would be hard to watch film on. You don't know what they're going to do with Trevor Lawrence coming out there. Urban Meyer's the new coach. They may be a little bit difficult to prepare for in week 1 and have a bit of an edge that way. But, for other teams, yeah, they're probably going to come out a lot crisper and looking a lot better, especially teams with a lot of veteran players. Having that additional week of practice together is probably going to show in that first week.
Yeah, I think it's just good for the NFL in general. Get rid of a preseason game, give these guys a chance to rest up and get into that first week. How many times do we see in the preseason, Miklos, that even though they're only playing 1 or 2 quarters, how many times do we see? And it's the nature of the business. It's the game of football. Injuries do happen, but I think eliminating that first game in the preseason will just limit even more injuries from taking place before the season, the real game start in the regular season when it really does matter.
Yeah, for sure. And it sounds counterintuitive, but you're actually way more likely to have an injury or something freaky happen in games that don't mean anything or practices where you're going lighter, because things happen that would never happen when you're going 100% all out and against players of comparable skill level. So in camp, where you have guys who maybe shouldn't be there, they're not at the caliber of NFL players, but they're getting the opportunity in camp. But then in preseason, weird stuff happens because people are trying things out. Because they know it doesn't matter. So that makes it almost more likely to have an injury happen whenever you're going easy, as opposed to going full out.
That's a good point, and I think it should be brought up that we usually see in the third preseason game, when we're used to having 4, that third preseason game is like the last kind of reps for the starters. They play like the first half of the third game, and then that's it. We don't see them again. With it only being 3 games, are we thinking that maybe the second game is going to be the time where we see the starters play a half, or do you think it might be this third game, given the fact that they'll have a week off, or do you think that third game is still going to be, because it's the last, it's going to be the last showcase for the guys that are fringe on making the 53-man roster?
I think what might happen is it's probably still going to be the same thing, where the first game they'll play a lot more starting time. The starters will play a lot more time, and in the second game, and then I think it'll trend down. I think the third game, because it is the last game before this massive cut, they're going to want to see everything they have out of these guys before they cut 27 of them. But I do think that the first 2 games may be more front-loaded with starters than we're used to seeing in the past. So maybe they play a full half of the first and second game both, and are putting in some serious reps before probably not even playing at all in the third game to try to establish what they have. Right?
Yeah, so hopefully, in general, one less preseason game makes the preseason a little bit more watchable. Hopefully that's the best part of it. The preseason every year, gets a lot of bad rap, but hopefully with this subtraction of the one game, it makes it a little bit more competitive in those 3 games. So with that said, let's move on here to some of the scheduling changes, and I'm going to pull it up for you on the screen. This is from CBS.com. The NFL will undergo its first significant regular season schedule change since 1978. As owners approved to add a 17th game to the regular season beginning in the 2021 season. The change was a year in the making, as owners had the option in a new collective bargaining agreement to increase the number of regular season games per club to 17, but not more at any time. The change will also result in the league reducing preseason games that we just mentioned from 4 to 3. This is a good monumental moment for the NFL, says Commissioner Roger Goodell. The CBA, with the players and the recently completed media agreements, provide the foundation for us to enhance the quality of the NFL experience for our fans. And one of the benefits of each team playing 17 regular season games is the ability for us to continue to grow our game around the world. Part 2 of that states, under the new scheduling formula, every team plays 17 games with 1 bye week. Clubs will host 10 games overall, either 9 regular season games and 1 preseason game, or 8 regular season games and 2 preseason games. Home and away against its 3 division, obviously the 6 games against your division. The 4 teams from another division within its conference on a rotating 3-year cycle. The 4 teams in a division on the other conference on a rotating 4-year cycle. So again, it's kind of hard to understand, but when you think about it, it makes a little bit more sense. And then a little bit more on the interconference and out-of-conference games there on the screen. But Other than that, the last part of it states the league will keep one bye week during the season, so regular season will expand from 17 to 18 weeks, pushing the conclusion of the regular season to January 9th. The season will begin on September 9th. The NFL postseason would start the weekend of January 15th, and the Super Bowl will be played on February 13th of 2022, the latest Super Bowl kickoff ever. The 2022 Pro Bowl will also return, so for you people who love the Pro Bowl, don't know if there are any out there, it will be played on February 6th, the week before the Super Bowl as usual. In addition, 32 clubs will play internationally at least once every 8 years. The scheduling of up to 4 neutral site games per year in a country outside the United States will focus initially on Canada, Europe, Mexico, South America, and the United Kingdom. The NFL 2021 schedule has already been announced as of this article coming out. So, Miklos, a lot there, but what are your initial reactions kind of to the 18 weeks in the season with the one bye week, 17 regular season games? We talked about the preseason being shortened, and just in general, every club is going to have to play internationally every 8 years, and the Super Bowl being pushed back to its latest date ever.
Yeah, so I think we've talked a couple of times since they first mentioned this publicly that they were strongly considering the 18-game season about and even last year, like the potential was there with COVID that they might extend it one more week. And I think the biggest thing that I take away from this initially is you can get really screwed with a bye week. If you have, because I think week 14 now, if I have it correct, I think is the last bye week. And if you have to play 13 games straight and then have a bye week, I mean, that is going to be a grind on a team to have to go through. And even like an early bye week, you get that early bye week and then all of a sudden you have a huge back end of the season. So I think we might, it may or may not affect teams, but I think we could see some teams get really screwed depending on their bye week location with the way it is with only one bye week in the season. So that's my first takeaway. I do think it's interesting that they're expanding beyond the UK for international games. I mean, they tried with Buffalo a little bit in Canada there, so we'll see how this takes to the international fan base, how these games end up working, and how they're going to schedule it depending on how far these teams need to travel. Because depending on where you are in Canada, if it's like an East Coast team that's got to fly all the way to the West Coast of Canada, if it's in like Vancouver or something like that, that could end up factoring into the schedule as well. Those are like the two biggest takeaways that I have right off the hop. But overall, I don't think it's going to be that radical of a change. It's really, they're playing essentially the same amount of football. I know it's one more serious game, which they wouldn't have had in the preseason, but it extends the season by just a week. We'll see how it works, how injuries work out, but I imagine it'll all end up coming out in the wash at the end of the day.
What I do find interesting is that they're trying to, because it's going to be, it's going to be a little bit off-centered there with not having 8 regular season home games, 8 away games in the regular season. So they're giving an extra preseason game at home out of the 3. So you're going to have, if you play one less home game in the regular season, you're going to get 2 out of the 3 at home in the preseason. So it's going to even out there as far as preseason home games and regular season home games, I guess you could say. They're trying to even it out there, but I mean, I'm sure teams would much rather have the one extra regular season game than the one extra preseason home game. But again, I hope that changes from year to year where, every other year it goes, you get the extra road game. One year you get the extra home game the next, and it kind of, evens out that way, because I don't want to start seeing teams every year that have one less home game than everybody else in the regular season, because I don't think that's going to be fair. I loved how the NFL did it, because you'd have 8 home games, 8 away games, and kind of trying to even it out like many other sports do with the NHL and NBA in a regular season having 41 and 41. So I think the NFL is going to be kind of an outlier now, having, one team having one more home game or road game than the other. So just what are your thoughts on that situation?
Honestly, and I think that's going to be crazier for the NFL than maybe any other sport. As you mentioned, you have 41 home and away games in hockey and basketball, and then in baseball you have 162 games total. At the end of the day, one game doesn't matter. But in the NFL, every game matters in terms of making the playoffs and where you're at in your division. And if you're a team like the Seahawks or the Chiefs or the Patriots, where being at home is a crazy advantage. I mean, they're especially with the crowd coming back now, and they have one more home game than say another and the other teams in their division don't. That could end up tipping the scales between playoff seeding or even making the playoffs. So that could end up being the most consequential thing about this new schedule format, that could cost some teams some games depending on and depends on how long of a road or home stretch you have too. I mean, say you have an early bye week and then you have a big grind at the end of the season, and then just the way it works out, you have a huge road stretch near the end of the season too. Like, you could end up getting really screwed by the schedule alone, let alone what else happens on the football field.
Yeah, and I think, you as a football historian, I think this is interesting that the first time since 1978 that they have changed the regular season schedule, Miklos. And again, I just mentioned, you love the history of the NFL and things like that. Just how significant of a move is that for them to kind of go against what they've done for, so many decades now in the NFL and the history of it? Do you think that they might be felt with some backlash, maybe from old school fans or old school players saying that they want the traditional 16 games because that's what the sport was built on?
Well, honestly, I think we've been spoiled to live in an era of very little change for an extremely long time. I mean, the NFL changed a lot. I mean, heck, there was a very serious rival to the NFL when the AFL existed before the merger and then the creation of the modern Super Bowl era. So I think change is something that very much defined the early NFL, and even changing the number of games. They jumped from 14 to 16, and originally I believe 12 to 14 as well, even earlier on. And so this is something that happened a lot, especially with all these expansion teams coming in too. And so we've been relatively blessed with stability recently in our modern era. So I think it's coming as a shock to a lot of people, but for maybe people who were a lot older and longtime NFL fans, this is just maybe a shock to them because it's been so long, but really shouldn't be something that's too radically new. Sort of like we haven't had an expansion team in a really long time, with the Houston Texans being the most recent one. But that also was a very common thing for a while, where 2-3 teams were joining the league, every couple of years until it finally stabilized with the number that we have now. But so I don't think it's so crazy. It's just crazy for us because it's been so stable for so long.
Yeah, since we've been alive, we really haven't seen much change in the league, and older generations maybe are used to seeing that with the expansion teams and things like that. But at least since we've been watching football, we've really seen the same teams, the same format, the same schedule, the same amount of games. So I'm all for it if it benefits the NFL, and I'm all for these changes that they're making with the one less preseason game, the added regular season game. Just again, it's going to be unfortunate with the one team having the one more away game, but it's going to be interesting, and I think it's going to bring another element to what's already an exciting NFL season every single year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm ready to see what this new season has in store for us.
Yep, for sure. So that's basically it for our first segment. So we're going to take a longer commercial break because we're going to come back and finish off with a longer segment talking about the schedule release, which was the thumbnail of this video if you're watching on YouTube. So we're going to discuss Thursday Night Football, Monday Night Football, and Sunday Night Football, and kind of what those lineups for primetime look like coming in the 2021 NFL season. So stay right here. I'll be right back on Straight to the Extra Point and right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network.
J&L Flooring is a Niagara-based specialty flooring and design company. They take great pride in providing elite customer service and support. They are a specialty flooring and decor boutique shop with a beautiful showroom, great pricing, and a wide variety and truly unique selection of products. All their products are environmentally friendly and responsibly produced, so you can feel great about your flooring choices. Their goal as a local business is to build authentic relationships based on honesty and integrity that they foster with respect and authenticity, offering unique and wide range of quality products presented by a knowledgeable and patient team. They connect with their customers to simplify the process to make their life easier and to make their homes beautiful. Visit them at 4424 Montrose Road, Niagara Falls, or find out more at jnlflooring.com. Open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. through 5 p.m., and Saturday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. 905-358-3299 J&L Flooring.
The Spicy Olive Bar and Grill is located on the top of Clifton Hill and just a 5-minute walk from the majestic Niagara Falls. It is conveniently nestled in the heart of the tourist district. A family-owned and operated business, the Spicy Olive opened its doors in May of 2003 and has since been established as an authentic and unique Italian restaurant and bar. Its rustic ambiance and time-worn finishing provide a warm and inviting dining experience. Offering an array of delicious dishes, they specialize in authentic Italian cuisine, homemade sauces, fresh ingredients, and consistently providing a strong foundation on which they build their menu. As night falls, the Spicy Olive shifts to a lively lounge where drinks and live music come together to make a perfect evening. For more than 15 years, they have provided not only for their dedicated locals, but their customers from all over the world with authentic Italian food and great live entertainment. Open daily 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. for dinner and till 2 a.m. for drinks. Check out their new menu and book reservations on their website at Spicy Olive Bar and Grill, it's with an E at the end, .com, or call 905-371-2323 for reservations as well. The Spicy Olive Bar and Grill.
Experience a new way to play daily fantasy sports and esports on Thrive Fantasy. Thrive's game concept revolves around player props, which are simple over-unders on player stats. There are contests for traditional sports including the NFL, NBA, MLB, PGA, and cricket, as well as esports titles including CSGO, Dota 2, League of Legends, and more coming soon. Here's how to play. Choose your lineup of over-unders for top-tier athletes that have the biggest impact on the game. Each prop has a fantasy point total based on how likely it is to hit. The more points the selection is worth, the riskier it is. Rack up the most points and win a share of the prize pool. Thrive is awarded over $2 million in cash, so come and prop up today.
You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network, the Niagara region's best local source for North American sports podcasting coverage. By sports fans, for sports fans.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to our second segment of today's Straight to the Extra Point episode. Brandon Caputo and Miklos McMaster back with you here. And our second and final segment today is brought to you by Custom PPE, Canada's leading face mask provider, best prices and quickest turnaround, built from right here in the Niagara region. Order today at customppe.ca. We've got ours. Time to get your custom face mask to keep us all safe at Custom PPE. So with that said, Miklos, we talked a little bit about how the schedule is going to work in the first segment and the addition of the extra regular season game, one less preseason game. So let's finally get into the scheduling and what that's going to look like for our primetime matchups here. And we'll start off here with Thursday Night Football. And for a change, Miklos, I mean, you discussed it before we went on the air here, and I got it up on the screen for you YouTube viewers here. Thursday Night Football. The schedule actually looks pretty decent. Thursday Night Football is usually the butt end of all the primetime jokes in the NFL, but it looks like this year they're doing a pretty good job of it. A lot of they're moving to Amazon Prime and Amazon Video, so maybe that's why they're making the games a little bit better now, because Amazon is involved to kind of up they wanted to make sure there were good games on these Thursday night games, and we usually see it being a lot of divisional games, a lot of lower end divisional games. But again, it looks like a pretty good lineup here, Miklos.
Yeah, you know what they say, money talks, and with Amazon taking over, it's significant enough that I noticed it pretty quickly about the quality of games on Thursday night now, and there's some seriously good matchups. I mean, it was frequently getting the crickets noise from our podcast throughout the week about matchups on Thursday night whenever we were talking about what matchups we were excited for last season. So there's definitely a lot more what look to be competitive and exciting games on Thursday night.
Yeah, for sure. And again, there's a couple in there that aren't on Thursday. So for you following along, you're going to say what's going on here. The Atlanta Falcons and New York Jets is considered, I guess, a primetime game, but it's being played on Sunday in London, England. So it's not going to be on Thursday, but Thursday Night Football, I guess, is the crew that's going to be going there for it. It's only available on NFL Network, so if you don't have NFL Network, you're going to be streaming this thing. And then other than that, you have a couple matchups to be announced there later in the year. I think it's later in Week 15 and Week 16 that there are going to be a couple of matchups announced. I guess they want to see what teams are doing well before they kind of put a couple of those games on there that might have some playoff implications. We've seen a couple of Saturday games at the end of last year in Week 16, I believe, that was Week 15 and Week 16 closer to the end of the season. But just what do you think about that, Miklos, the fact that Thursday Night Football has given themselves kind of a buffer here? We know that Sunday night has the flexing after a certain week. Do you think that this is a good idea for Thursday football to be played on a Saturday later in the year with some key matchups that might affect playoff outcomes?
For sure. I think, it just gets better whenever they want to have the best games available. And also, as we saw last year, I mean, and it's happened a few times before, where teams really need to know what's happening in other games. And so having those games kind of happening one after another so that teams are aware of what's at stake, or if they still need to make the play, still have an opportunity to make the playoffs and these kinds of things. I think that's an important thing. And then to have it on Saturday instead of Thursday, I think is a big deal, because teams really, really don't like the short week. And it's a huge problem whenever you're recovering from the previous week and then having to prep on a short week and get your guys ready and healthy. It is really tough, especially if you need to travel. So that's definitely going to be a huge factor, especially later in the season.
Yeah, just don't let Doug Peterson see what happens on the Saturday to the Sunday game, especially if his team's in the last Sunday night game of the year and basically tanks that game away. But we won't get into that. He's no longer the head coach, so I don't want to throw salt on that wound. But what are a couple of games that stick out to you on the Thursday night schedule there, Miklos? A couple of divisional games, but not as many as maybe we've seen in previous years. Like you mentioned, money talks, so Amazon being involved in this now, a lot better, I guess, quality-wise in these games. At least you'd see with the matchups. Again, some teams might end up looking better than others. Some teams might not be as good as we might expect them to be. But for the most part, what are a couple of the matchups that you're really looking forward to here?
Ironically, maybe not ironically, I can see why a lot of people would be excited, but Week 4, Jacksonville and Cincinnati, I think is going to be really exciting. I mean, we see Trevor Lawrence and Joe Burrow facing off for the first time in their NFL careers, so I think that's going to be an exciting matchup to see those two young studs come out and play their game. So that's one that immediately jumps out to me. And then as for some of the other matchups, just looking through, I think later in the year, Kansas City matching up against the Rams, I think is just going to be a good game, because with Matt Stafford on a team that's pushing to win the Super Bowl, and the Rams, they're in win now mode for sure. And then Kansas City, obviously, perpetual Super Bowl contender as long as they have Mahomes there. Those are the two that immediately jumped out to me as that I would be looking forward to.
Yeah, I think one that might shock some people, that might be, a little bit better of a game than maybe we would have expected, might be that New York Jets and Indianapolis Colts game on week, I guess, 9. Again, those are two teams that we're kind of interested to see what's going to happen. Carson Wentz coming over at Indianapolis, and then you have Zach Wilson, the rookie quarterback for the New York Jets. So to me, that's one game that might be flying under the radar that, again, might be an interesting one. You have an up-and-coming team and kind of a team that's trying to get back on their feet like the Jets, and then you have a team like the Colts, who everybody said they were a great quarterback away from winning the Super Bowl, and it's going to be interesting to see if Carson Wentz is that guy, reuniting with Frank Reich, who he had in Philadelphia when he had his one great year there, and kind of seeing if the Colts team is going to take that next step. So I think that's an interesting one in the AFC. And as far as the rest of them go, Dallas, New Orleans, I don't know. I really want to see how New Orleans comes out of the gate with what their quarterback situation is going to be. If that was Drew Brees versus Dak Prescott, that might be a little bit more interesting. Atlanta, New England, obviously me as an Atlanta fan would love to see them get revenge on New England, even though over the whole 28-3 thing. So, in week 11, I'm going to have to hear those jokes coming back up again. But I think the one matchup that I'm really looking forward to, and it's a little bit later in the year, is the Kansas City and San Diego. I'm always going to call them San Diego. The Los Angeles Chargers. That's a division matchup, and I really believe that the Chargers are going to finally take that next step now that they have Justin Herbert coming off an incredible rookie year. And again, you being a Raiders fan, you know what the AFC West is like, and you really want to see a team step up and be a contender to the Kansas City Chiefs and not just have them roll over the division every year. So I'm really looking forward to seeing if the Chargers can finally, get over that hump of always being great on paper and then just never producing once it comes to push comes to shove.
Yeah, I think, Justin Herbert, you can say all you want about, how difficult it is to win in the NFL and everything. Justin Herbert's biggest task is overcoming the curse that is the former San Diego, now Los Angeles Chargers, because that franchise has just been, it's become a permanent fixture of them just underperforming in games and losing games by close margins that they were leading in. And it's just been really unfortunate there. And we saw with Phillip Rivers, unbelievable career that he had there, and just so many times where they had great offenses and great defense, and the special teams just a disaster. So it'll be really interesting to see if he can change the narrative in now Los Angeles for the Chargers, and maybe things will look different in the future.
Yeah, the Chargers, I feel like, I feel a connection to them because I feel like they're the Atlanta Falcons of the AFC. Just always expectations, great offense for the most part, and just never put it together, and always blowing away leads and losing to teams that they shouldn't. But other than that, the other couple of games that I just want to note real quick, I think this is week 6, Tampa Bay and Philadelphia. Not because of the teams, but because Tom Brady getting his revenge against Philadelphia from that Super Bowl. Again, Nick Foles is not on the team, but you know that Tom Brady's going to want to beat the Eagles at every single cost. So I think that's one to watch. Again, Brady getting a rematch against the Eagles that beat him in the Super Bowl, one of the only teams that really did that. And the other team, the New York Giants, I think that week 2, the first technical Thursday night game on week 2, is a good divisional matchup in the NFC East as a division that's trying to build their way back up. And I really think those two teams there, the Giants and the Washington football team, both are on the rise and have something to prove there, Miklos. I think that's going to be a very exciting week 2 game there, as the NFC East and those two teams, I think, are going to be battling for the division title this year. With we'll see what Dallas looks like, but I think those two teams right there are ones that have a lot to prove, and I think have a lot of upside that we haven't maybe seen in previous years.
Yeah, for sure. I think it definitely feels like, we know what Dallas is going to bring to the table, and it didn't feel like they addressed quite enough of the holes on their defense as you would expect them to. I know drafting, they drafted Parsons out of Penn State, and they add another great linebacker, but still, it definitely feels like the Giants and Washington have a more complete roster on terms of like strength on offense and defense, especially with the weapons that the Giants added on the offensive end of the football. And let's not forget Saquon Barkley's coming back, and we all know that ACL injuries aren't quite what they used to be for players. Players are coming back with only a slight maybe step off from what they used to be. So that's going to be huge for them. And then with the addition of Kenny Golladay for Danny Dimes over there, it's going to be interesting to see how both those teams come out, especially early on in the year.
Yeah, the New York Giants offense and the Washington football team defense, that's going to be a great matchup for the first week of Thursday Night Football. So let's move on to Monday Night Football, Miklos, and they don't have as nice of a graphic as Thursday night had, but it's up on the screen for you guys there. Again, Miklos, what are you looking forward to? And I before I give it to you, I will mention that usually week 1 Monday Night Football, there's usually a back-to-back. It's usually a doubleheader on Monday Night Football, but they got rid of that this year because of the extra game added. So there won't be 2 Monday night games in week 1 like usual. It's just going to be 1 game every single week. So with that said, what are you thinking about the Monday Night Football lineup this year?
So the 2 games that jumped out to me right away are the first Monday Night Football game and the last Monday Night Football game. The first Monday Night Football game happens to feature my Las Vegas Raiders against Baltimore Ravens, and that's really going to be the litmus test for us to kick off the season. We performed well early on last year against competitive teams, and then really just burning hunk of garbage falling out of the sky through the second half of the season. So, but here we are against Lamar Jackson and one of the top teams in the AFC, and it's going to be a real test on our defense. Are we ready for Lamar Jackson, this Ravens offense, and what we can bring to the table this year? So I think it's going to be exciting for me. It's on a national stage, the primetime game, and so that is going to be exciting for that reason alone. But also a good test to see just what this Raiders roster is bringing to the table. And then the last Monday Night Football game is going to be huge between Cleveland and Pittsburgh. I think this is going to have massive playoff implications. We all know what the AFC North is about when it comes to rivalries with the vicious games that teams have had historically, especially when it comes to late in the season. And is this time for a changing of the guard where Cleveland steps up and says this division is ours now and knocks Pittsburgh off the pedestal? We saw how Pittsburgh started last year and then the way they finished, and what are they going to be like this year? How they started or how they finished at the end of last season? So I think that's going to be a huge game with a lot of playoff implications and also extremely competitive football.
Yeah, the AFC North is going to be a fun division to watch this year, and that's a great way to end Monday Night Football, just like they kind of ended last season as well. But I think it's to be mentioned there, Miklos, about your Raiders. That's really going to be their essential home opener of their new stadium in Vegas because there weren't fans there last year. So this is going to be the first essential home opener where you're going to have, the new black hole essentially filling the seats in Las Vegas. So I think that's going to be huge for the Raiders, the Raider Nation there, to be there for that first game against Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. It's going to be a huge test, and we'll kind of see how the black hole transitions from Oakland to Las Vegas, if it's really going to be, another great home field advantage for the Raiders, even though they're in a new stadium and a new city in general, a new home.
Yeah, I mean, we all know that Raiders fans travel well, and especially in games previously in San Diego, it felt like Raiders home games. But it's going to be Allegiant Stadium filling up with fans for the first time. I am so excited for it, and I imagine just from that alone, it is going to be a rocking atmosphere.
Yeah, I want to see what Mark Davis and John Gruden are going to be like on game day, if they're going to be able to contain themselves with all that energy there. But those are two really solid games. I think another game of intrigue are two teams that are kind of projected to win their divisions next year, this coming season. Week 6, Buffalo Bills at Tennessee Titans. We know the history there with the Music City Miracle. I think the Bills at Titans is also a great matchup. We know, like you mentioned, Raider Nation travels, Bills Mafia travels as well. So I think there's going to be a lot of Bills fans down there in Tennessee. So I think that's another key one to look forward to on Week 6, Bills at Titans, just for the kind of history with that matchup as well. And then trying to look for a cross-conference game here, or even one that kind of pops out to me. Obviously, the Bills having a home game as well against New England Week 13. That's going to be rocking a Bills home game on Monday night against their bitter rival New England Patriots. They've got a couple of games here on Monday Night Football that are significant, but other than that, I'm looking at Seattle, New Orleans. Week 7 might be an interesting one, given Seattle's at home there. We know what the 12th man is like, and just in general, it's going to be great to have, like you mentioned a little bit in the first segment, these great fan bases back making a difference on the game, when in football it might be more important than any other sport, when you're trying to get those hard counts and you're trying to stop the away team from being able to communicate. How many times over the years did we see Peyton Manning get frustrated even with his own home crowd for being too loud? And when you're an away team, it's that much more difficult to try to communicate at the line of scrimmage and things like that. So just having fans back in these buildings, I think, is going to be massive, especially on prime time. They're going to have all day to tailgate and get ready for get themselves rocking for these games. And just in general, I think it's going to be great to have these great spectacles back at these unbelievable stadiums for NFL atmosphere.
Yeah, and I guarantee in the first couple of weeks, it's probably going to be outrageously loud, with crowds allowed back full force for the first time. I mean, and it might be, we might see some more mistakes, even though they have the bye week, just from having a year that was so weirdly silent, and all of a sudden to have probably playoff level atmosphere to kick off the season. I think that's probably going to affect especially rookies for sure, probably. But but even some vets who have had a full year without experiencing that level of volume, I think it might affect them too.
No, it might. And again, the adrenaline is going to be something that they probably weren't used to for about a year. So I think that might take some getting used to for those players as well. And then a couple, I think, of key NFC West matchups there, the LA Rams and San Francisco 49ers, and then the LA Rams in Week 14 against the Arizona Cardinals. So I think that's going to be a crazy division this year too, Miklos, one of the most competitive, if not the most competitive in football. So I'm glad that they're going to be showcasing the AFC West on a couple of games there and showcasing Matt Stafford on the new LA Rams team. Just a couple of key matchups there in the NFC West.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be exciting, especially with San Francisco coming back healthy and with a new quarterback. If Trey Lance takes over and starts playing some exciting football over there if he takes over from Jimmy G, I mean, who knows what's going to happen there, but there's definitely going to be lots of opportunities for exciting football, especially out of the NFC West Arizona just keeps adding talent every year and keeps looking better and better. But now with Matt Stafford over there slinging the rock for the Rams, it's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked about Arizona, how great they've done in the last couple of years and for, months and weeks on end on these shows. So NFC West going to be great, showcased on Monday Night Football very regularly this year. And last but not least, everybody's favorite Sunday Night Football. Again, it's they don't have the greatest graphic up on the screen, but it'll do. Miklos, what are we looking at here for Sunday Night Football? They're going to have 17 weeks of it, and obviously they have the kickoff game, which is going to be Dallas and Tampa Bay, the home game for the defending Super Bowl champion Tom Brady and the Dallas Cowboys, America's team, going in there. That should be an exciting kickoff to kick off Sunday Night Football in the first game. It's not essentially a Sunday game because it's the first game of the season, but after that, every game is obviously on Sunday night. But technically, they're going to have 18 Sunday Night Football games. So what are you looking at from their lineup?
Yeah, so I'm looking at it's week 2. We have what was 2 years ago the quote unquote death of defense game with the Chiefs playing against the Ravens in that unbelievable matchup of Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson only a couple of seasons ago. I think that's going to be a massive game and has massive playoff implications. And then just 2 weeks later, we have TB12, Tom Terrific, returning. Unbelievable to be saying returning to New England to be facing off against the Patriots, which is going to be, who knows what the actual game is going to be like, but storyline-wise is going to be an unbelievable setup. The media that week is going to be insane, and I'm excited to see what tricks Bill Belichick has in store for his former partner in crime as he returns to the Patriots. And I mean, who knows who's going to be quarterbacking the Patriots? I mean, right now it's Cam Newton, but hey, if Mac Jones turns out to be a revelation and takes over, I mean, that could be really interesting as well. So those two to kick off Sunday Night Football for sure are going to be very exciting.
Yeah, I mean,
and then later. Sorry.
Go ahead. I was just about to say flexing can begin in week 5. So the first 4, technically 5 because of the opening game. The first 5 games are locked in, but after that, starting in week 5, I don't expect the Bills and Chiefs to be flexed out, let's be honest here. But starting with that game and beyond, those games can be flexed out for better matchups, which Sunday Night Football is always really the only game that has that kind of privilege to be able to do that.
Sure. And it's funny that you mentioned that because out of the first 5 weeks, even if those were in weeks, 10 to 6 or 10 to 15, not a chance would any of those get flexed out. I mean, you're looking at these matchups, even like Chicago and the Rams coming in. I mean, I know that's not maybe the sexiest game, but hey, if it's Justin Fields' first primetime game and he's leading this new Chicago Bears team against Matt Stafford on a new team, that's an exciting game that people are going to want to see, right? So I think all of those games at the beginning of the year are extremely exciting. And of course, week 10, my Las Vegas Raiders playing against the Kansas City Chiefs is going to be a game that I'm going to be very excited for. We had opportunities to beat them not once but twice last year in both of our matchups, and we did beat them in the first matchup. So I think it's going to be pretty exciting to watch that game. And it'll be exciting. I mean, both games were very high-scoring games, so even for people who aren't fans of either of those teams, I think it's going to be a really exciting Sunday night matchup.
And I think just in general, Sunday Night Football has become, the new Monday Night Football for maybe our parents' generation, where that was the key game. That was the game everybody wanted to be on. Now I think it's Sunday Night Football, where they try to get the best watchability possible. The best of the best teams are playing in the best of the best games. That's why they have the ability to flex out after week 4, just to make sure that it's always good matchups. And I do find it interesting that there are a lot of division games actually from week 13 to week 17 are all divisional games to end Sunday Night Football. So I don't know if that was done on purpose. I would assume it would be if it was the final 5 weeks of the season being all divisional game matchups with San Francisco, Seattle, Chicago, Green Bay, New Orleans, Tampa Bay, Washington, Dallas, and Minnesota, Green Bay. What do you think about how they're kind of laying that out the last 5 weeks in key divisional games?
Yeah, I think that was definitely on purpose. You can even looking at it right now, we don't know how the season's going to go already, but just from looking at it at the beginning of the season, those all look like they're going to have huge playoff implications on what happens, especially being so late in the season and being divisional matchups for seeding or tiebreakers and what have you. So that is definitely going to be. I can see, even if they may not look like they're going to be the best game, I think just because of the intensity that they're expected to be at and what's going to be on the line, it's going to be pretty difficult to flex those games out based on what's going to be happening with what happens with the playoffs and where teams end up being seeded.
And I think even if they do flex these games out, Miklos, I think they're going to replace them with another divisional game. I don't know what the rest of the schedule is going to look like, but I assume they're going to be able to find other divisional matchups to kind of stick in there, because I think that's what their really big reason is. They want to have those key divisional games on Sunday night mean something down the road if those teams are in playoff contention, and if they're not, they're going to flex them out for 2 teams that are battling within their division for a playoff spot. So I think that even if they do flex those out, they want to have the last 5 weeks of the season be those key divisional matchups. But other than that, like you mentioned, I mean, Tampa Bay, New England speaks for itself. Brady versus New England. All you need to do is just say Tom Brady versus New England Patriots, and that's enough for anybody to want to watch this game with Tom returning to New England to play against his old team. And again, I think that Buffalo Bills Kansas City Chiefs rematch from the AFC Championship game, I think that's going to be big. The Bills are going to want to come out and kind of show that they are for real and they are a key contender for the Chiefs. And really any team playing the Chiefs, like you mentioned, the Raiders have something to prove to them. The Baltimore Ravens have something to prove as well. After it's interesting because they just made a big offseason trade there for starting tackle that is going to protect Patrick Mahomes now, as opposed to Lamar Jackson. The draft picks going over to the other side, so it's going to be interesting to see that key trade and how that will kind of fare in their matchup, if any. But any team playing the Chiefs is obviously a big game on Sunday night, wanting to prove themselves in prime time with everybody watching. But I think for the most part, Sunday Night Football has done a great job here. There really isn't a game that sticks out to me that looks bad, which is what they go for in Sunday night, as they want that to be their big matchup of the football week, and for good reason. It has become the crown jewel of wanting to play in the NFL and being on that Sunday night primetime game on NBC.
Yeah, absolutely. And also another interesting storyline from that Tampa Bay New England game. I think Tom Brady, if he wins, would be the 3rd player ever to beat every single third starting quarterback to beat, because I think Brett Favre and Peyton Manning both did it, beat every single team in the NFL, which is a rare milestone to reach, as most guys who end up being that good don't end up changing teams. They usually retire on the team that they started with or where they were the most successful. But yeah, so that's another interesting storyline to keep an eye out for. But yeah, as you said, Sunday night, I mean, just the quality of the games across the board, as it has become the main event, it feels like, every week, with Monday Night Football kind of coming in at a close second after that. So definitely lots of huge matchups this year. And as you mentioned, that Kansas City Baltimore game, week 2, one huge matchup for 2 top teams in the AFC. But yeah, interesting to see how Baltimore tackles their former tackle, who is now on the Kansas City Chiefs after that huge offseason trade. It'll be very interesting to see how that game plays out that way.
Yeah, protecting Patrick Mahomes. And I think in general, all the primetime games, they look, for the most part, look good. I mean, we always think Thursday Night Football is coming up the rear for the most part, but I think they've done a good job. And I think, like we mentioned, Amazon has a big part in that. So, like, obviously Sunday night has the best schedule. we're not going to sit here and say it doesn't. But I think Monday night and Thursday night, they've done a good job at least making that gap a little less than maybe we've seen in previous years, where Sunday night just blew the other two out of the water. And, they're going to have the best because of the flexing availability as well. But I do think Thursday night football and Monday night football did a good job at stepping up, and the NFL kind of rewarding those other two primetime games to mean something as well, not just always having Sunday night be the front and center.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're evening it out more, and I also think just overall as a league, the NFL is developing more and more parity as over the past two seasons. It really feels like it's hard to say that a team is a perpetual dumpster fire. I mean, we mentioned Cleveland's becoming a lot better. It really feels like the Jets turned around this offseason. It'd be interesting to see what happens. I mean, with the exceptions of the Texans this year, but it really feels like they were serious contenders only the last couple of years, and they just dropped off. And I mean, if they can turn it around in the next two seasons, then it's just a little blip and then they go back on their way again. But it really feels like most divisions have become seriously competitive, with any of the teams really having an opportunity for the most part to win the division heading into the playoffs.
Well said, and that's a good wrap for our schedule release episode there. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. It's definitely gotten me fired up, Miklos. I know football is still months away from happening, and we get to the preseason and the regular season starting, in early September there. But just by having the schedule and hopefully some normalcy back come this fall, it's exciting for NFL fans and for those that are going to be getting an opportunity to go to these games once again and have their voice heard and make an impact on these games. I think is going to be big, and everybody's just excited, especially for the schedule being released and these primetime games. Everybody's going to have an opportunity this year, like they've done in the last couple of years, to everybody have a primetime game, even if it is a Thursday night game. They've upped that as well. So I think it's very refreshing for us to have some positive news as we continue to try to fight through this pandemic up here in Canada, and for our friends down south in the United States and where you're living right now in the U.S. It's definitely exciting, and we can't wait to get fans back in the building at hopefully full capacity, but even at half capacity, it's still going to bring that NFL feel back to everybody there at the game and to those watching at home as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing is having fans back this year. That's going to be huge, and I'm just excited for this new season of football to get ready and get started. Yep,
and we'll be right here with you guys for that later on in the year, but we'll be back for another episode, hopefully soon, discussing a couple of the key players that might be on the move. Julio Jones, Aaron Rodgers. We still don't know what's going on with Deshaun Watson, so we're still going to come back and talk to you guys about some big offseason moves that do take place, or just discuss our thoughts on a couple of those players maybe moving. It could be a big year for some top-end players being moved before the season starts, and could kind of change our outlook on, when we get into our division preview shows, which we do every year as well. It could be drastically different. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you guys enjoyed our schedule release thoughts. We were able to stretch that out into almost an hour episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. And right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network, your source of North American sports coverage by sports fans for sports fans, delivered to you right here in the beautiful Niagara region. As always, I'm one of your hosts of the show. My name is Brandon Miklos. You can follow me on Twitter right there below at Caputs13_AGM. And you can follow my co-host Miklos at Miklos_McMaster. Miklos, appreciate you taking the time out from your busy day out west there, doing some scouting of those NFL teams on the West Coast. Hopefully have you back on soon.
Yes, sir. Thanks very much, Coach. Been a pleasure.
Yep, and a big thank you to all of the great sponsors who help put us on and support the network, keeping the show on the air, and to you viewers out there and football junkies for tuning in and listening along for this episode. And once again, this is Straight to the Extra Point on the Armchair GM Sports Network by sports fans for sports fans. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe, as my pillow says to my left. So we'll see you guys in the coming weeks for another football episode.